Very happy, very grateful to share some thoughts with you. Following the questions that were stated at an email I got from the IACL, I will try to develop some ideas, but prior to that, let me push forward a couple of basic statements, some kind of caveat. Firstly, let me say that emergency is a normative concept. This means that proceedings, institutes, rules, if they are based upon a normative outlook, and they are constrained in the way we read them. Of course, this drives me to another conclusion. There is a clear-cut distinction between emergencies and exceptions, which means that we can never read emergencies as a loophole or a kind of passport that allows the executive to enlarge their powers as he pleased. The second basic idea is that regardless if we are concerned with human rights issues or case law, it is fundamental, at least from a deep global south perspective, to understand that the connection between the organic part of the Constitution, the ancient Rome, as Gargarella says, which is key to see, which is the actual behavior, which is the actual performance of a polity. And having said this, let me give you a few highlights to depict the constitutional setting in Argentina. Argentina follow U.S. model. In 1853, we enacted our constitution, which was, as Benjamin Gorostiaga said, was casted within the U.S. model. We have separation of power. It's a presidential system. We are a federation. Nonetheless, if we look in the long run, we came to know that we are far away from the template, that we are a kind of distorted model, those that are labeled as hyper-presidential or imperial presidentialism. And to my knowledge, this is not a straightforward connected consequence derived from populism thriving in the region. My understanding says that there are some flaws in the constitutional design. This meaning that unfettered executives are coupled with reckless representatives and subordinated judges. So the impulse, the president gaining momentum, and the leadership drags the Congress, the legislative power have very low esteem, public esteem is very low concerning the Congress, which is not the place where deliberation brings and pull together different outlooks. And of course, courts as well are the place where subordinated judges or untamed judges, not in an Herculean way, but I would say in a rather Procrustean way, somehow support the executive leadership. So let's go to the first question, and concerning the responses to the pandemic. Argentina, from the very beginning, the executive took important measures, compulsive test to population, and they decided selective quarantine. They also prevent people coming from hot COVID destinations to come back to Argentina. The airports were shut down, likewise with the borders. And finally, 60 days ago, more or less, the executive issued the executive order 297, according to which the social, preventive, and compulsory isolation was issued, and this provide, a very compelling and risky decision from the executive. People kept shelter and isolated, and as a result of these measures, the duly response of the executive, we would say that in terms of health policies, the government have been very successful. There were other executive orders that, of course, would undergo constitutional challenge, I'm sure of that, prevented labor suspensions or prevented, eviction. The economy was busted before. Argentina is undergoing a huge economic crisis. Once again, the inflation is skyrocketing, and all the figures are very daunting. And my grasp is that we are facing crummy times. So if we have to address the second question, to make a whole assessment of what's going on with these executive orders, I would say that in terms of policy making, as regards to gaining some time to enhance, the hospital equipment, the government have been pretty successful because they bought ventilators, and the increasing toll of contagiousness has been reasonable. If you compare with other countries, Argentina have done pretty well. The president, this is a side note, was backed by a kind of epistocracy with pundit physicians and experts that were backing the executive decisions. And if I have to make an assessment, a critical assessment, I would say that very few people, in the political bodies were engaged in all these decisions, are backing the president and, a kind of croupier awarding some rewards or burdens. This is, to my knowledge, something that will bring about future constitutional challenges at courts. Argentina has a doctrine on constitutionality of emergency decrees, very close to the U.S. case law in home building be bicycle, for example. This often quoted in Argentine case law, with a standard of scrutiny very demanding, with a threshold of constitutionality that I'm not quite sure whether this is going to be accepted in the future. So, concerning the third question, I would say that there are other very detrimental elements to be aware, particularly some kind of biopolitics. People are being monitored by office holders that are not controlled, and there is this temptation, not as it happened in the Far East, but here that people are under scrutiny and vigilance and surveillance almost any time. And of course, there are, I would say, a kind of temptation, the executive to move forward a supra-constitutional state, which is of course not possible if we understand that emergencies should be construed within a constitutional framework, as I said. So, as a final remark, if you allow me, I will read this quote from Thomas Hobbes, who said, "For he that had strength enough to protect all wants not sufficiency to oppress all." This is my final thought. Thank you very much.